These days, there's so much news, it can be hard to keep up with what it all means for you, your family, and your community. The Consider This podcast from NPR features our award-winning journalism. 6 days a week, we bring you a deep dive on a news story and provide the context and analysis that helps you make sense of the news. We get behind the headlines. We get to the truth. Listen to the Consider This podcast from NPR.
The company pioneering the AI revolution says it could be bigger than when Bill Gates set out to put a computer on every desk.
What was your vision?
Well, a computer on every desk and in every home.
Microsoft says AI is bigger than the internet.
Behold, the internet!
Bigger than the mobile revolution.
An iPod. A phone. Are you getting it?
Microsoft President Brad Smith says the best comparison is the advent of electricity.
Our view is that AI is the next great general-purpose technology, a technology that will impact every part of the economy, like electricity did more than a century ago.
Now, Microsoft is pledging $4 billion in cash and technology to train millions of students and workers to use AI. I'm Monica Nickelsburg, and this is Booming, a podcast about the economic forces shaping our lives here in the Pacific Northwest. Throughout history, a handful of general-purpose technologies have remade the world, leaving anyone who doesn't have access to them behind. Today, is AI the new electricity? And if so, what does that mean for all of us? A tech historian takes us back in time to search for lessons we can take into the future. That's coming up.
You want some of my electricity, do you? Well, for once, the rich white man is in control. I have 2 buttons behind this desk. One will supply your town with power. The other releases the hounds.
Margaret O'Mara is an author and a technology historian at the University of Washington and a frequent guest on our show. Margaret, great to have you back.
Great to be here. Thanks, Monica.
So, Margaret, you may have heard that Microsoft President Brad Smith's favorite catchphrase of the moment is AI is the electricity of our age. Is that the right historic analog?
Well, there certainly are parallels. Like electricity, AI has been a technology long evolving, building on existing technologies. I mean, artificial intelligence has been a term of art in computing since the middle of the 1950s, and it's only now that it has achieved the critical mass of data, money, capacity to have the boom that we're currently having. Similarly, electricity, similar things happened. You had a lot of experimentation and, from Ben Franklin forward throughout the 18th into the 19th century. And it's only in 1870s and 1880s when suddenly you get critical mass with a number of inventors, most notably Thomas Edison. And you also have a kind of capacity to distribute it. A light bulb doesn't work unless you have something to plug it into, unless there are public utilities and networks and concentrations of populations in cities that need electric light.
That's interesting. So, in other words, it wasn't just a technological breakthrough, but it was so many things that had to go right at the same time, both for electricity and now for artificial intelligence.
That's right. That's right. And of course, electricity is not only the light bulb, it's also the powering of industry. I mean, you have, preceding electrical power, there was steam power, the steam engine. And then the next, sort of industrial revolution comes with the advent of electrical power. But of course, one of the interesting things about electricity, although it was presented in the late 19th century and into the 20th century, is this very, very modern and very clean technology. Something that, one great plague of 19th century cities was all the smoke created by coal, burning coal. And what the electric utilities managed to do was to separate that actual coal burning, the dirty part of energy generation, from the clean delivery of the power, electric light, electric power, making it seem like it was clean. But actually, it was, then and now, much electricity we use is powered by coal-powered plants, less so than in the 19th century, but the dirty business continues.
And you could say the same for AI, right?
You definitely could say the same for AI. AI is something that's delivered to our desktops and our smartphones as something that's kind of disembodied and clean and, magic, and actually is created by, there's a very material reality to it. There's a back end that here in Washington, and go to Eastern Washington and along the Columbia, there are these enormous data centers that are where all the data is stored and processed. They use a lot of energy and they produce a lot of heat and they're using a lot of water. And they're located in Eastern Washington along the Columbia to access the hydropower of our region's dams.
Yeah, and we are going to be taking our listeners to the Columbia Basin on an upcoming episode to get a really up-close look at what is behind this magical technology. But back to the question of the moment, one thing that really strikes me about electricity is it was spread pretty much everywhere across the country in a relatively short period of time. Was there some sort of secret history that made what to me seems like kind of a technological miracle like that possible?
Mm-hmm. Well, distribution of electricity was really enabled by the pre-existence of municipal utilities that were distributing gas, the old way of lighting streets and homes before electric light. And two, by the industrialization and development and urbanization that comes before it. It's an interesting public-private story, as almost everything in American history is. This is a story of individual inventors and entrepreneurs, Edison and others. Edison famously battled with George Westinghouse and Nikola Tesla over what type of electrical current was going to become the predominant one. So you have a lot of private entrepreneurs who are trying to be just kind of like the AI arms race, kind of being the first and the best to define the space and dominate the market. Thomas Edison in particular was really good at PR and getting people to pay attention to everything he was doing.
Yeah, Tom Edison kind of sounds like the Sam Altman of his day.
Yeah. So this is, initially that's kind of this all sorts of different providers trying to compete for the market. And then the way that you scale up, of course, is you can't have a bunch of small companies. You need to have more universal service. You need to have some public entities that are not only kind of giving consistent service across a large area, but also enabling people to access that service regardless of their income and their ability to pay. So in the early days of electricity in New York City, for example, the really, really, really rich people, J.P. Morgan, the great banker, was a great example of this, actually installed like an electric generator in their house. So they kind of had coal-fired electric plant in their basement. Let me say that was not very safe, fire safe in 19th century New York. But you had initially you had these multimillionaires who were like, ooh, I want some of that.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that initially, electricity was something that was distributed by private companies or owned by very, very wealthy individuals. And then it was seen as such a essential key to the future economy that the government stepped in to ensure that it was spread more widely. That struck me because right now we're in this moment where very, very wealthy private companies are controlling, developing, distributing artificial intelligence. Do you think it's going to be as essential to the future economy that the federal government will feel an imperative to step in to make sure that areas that today don't even have internet are able to access this technology? Or is it going to lead to a situation where there's even more of a divide between the communities that can cash in on the industries of the future and the ones that are left behind?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's a good question. And I don't know if the answer has quite made itself clear yet, in part because, we're in a big hype cycle right now. In a way, we're kind of back to the late 1880s when everyone was hyping up electricity and Thomas Edison was doing all these demos and everyone's getting really excited. And it wasn't really clear what all of it would mean. But I think that there are choices being made now that are consequential. The fact that AI is something that is so much where you have these few very large platform companies, including two of our hometown companies, having such a huge, huge role in the ecosystem, including kind of pulling in so many talented people to work on these technologies. And then the question becomes, okay, so is the AI that's being developed something that actually is going to be of a net benefit to the greatest number of people? And companies definitely, Microsoft included, have kind of are trying to, message very strongly that they care about that. And I think I think that's an earnest promise, but also it's different than, say, a public utility or a government. It's a private company, and all of these companies are in the business of, they're private for-profit companies. They're doing what they should do. They're marketing products for us to buy, and which is fine. But a public utility, a government, has a different obligation and doesn't have a profit motive, ostensibly, too.
We talked a little bit about how transformative electricity and industrialization were on jobs in America. I mean, most people were farmers. Today, very few people are. What is similar or different about how AI is going to change our jobs?
Well, the introduction of electricity, had a profound effect on the way people worked and how many people worked doing what. In factories, it sort of accelerated the speed and power of factories for a very long time. But on we look at farms and electrification of rural America, which had incredibly positive effects in terms of health outcomes and educational outcomes and the efficiency and productivity of American agriculture. But then as agriculture scaled up and became more efficient, you need fewer people working it. You need fewer people working on the farms and people owning the farms. And so the advent of rural electrification also is coinciding with the depopulation of rural America and the end of the family farm, the consolidation of small family farms into larger business enterprises. And so that was a real social change that comes with both boons and costs. And so, it's tempting to say of a new general purpose technology or any new big tech wave to say it's all good or all bad, celebrate it or burn it all down. And actually the reality, when we look historically, it's always bumpier than that. It's more complicated. There are trade-offs, there are pluses, there are minuses. And I think that's, while comparisons are imperfect, we're never going to have this, this is just like then. AI is just like electricity. I think that it's a yes and no. But having that historical awareness and understanding, okay, we've been through these transitions before, and how did it play out and why did people, what did people think at the time that proved to actually not be the case, or where were they absolutely right on? Those are really useful. And, we're at the moment of a lot of excitement and a lot of so much attention being paid to AI that it's really useful to think about these earlier moments and recognize what we might be on the cusp of experiencing.
It does feel like we're watching the birth of a technology with the power to change almost every job and industry, the same way that electricity did. I'm sure there will be a lot more to say about this, but I think we'll end it there for now. Margaret O'Mara, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
That's it for Booming. Thank you so much for listening. If you have a question about the economy that you want us to answer, email us at booming@kuow.org. Or you can leave us a voicemail at 206-221-7158. Also, special thanks to those of you who donate to the show. We couldn't do it without you. If you want to donate, go to kuow.org/booming. And thanks. Our producers are Lucy Suchek and Alec Cowan. Our editor is Carol Smith. Booming is hosted by Joshua McNichols and me, Monica Nickelsburg. We'll see you next week.
Hey, I'm Ton Vin, host of Seattle Eats, a food podcast from the Seattle Times and KUOW. It's restaurant season. Dozens of new spots have opened all over the region in the last couple of weeks. On the latest episode of Seattle Eats, I highlight 3 of the biggest new openings and tell you what you should order there. Listen to Seattle Eats on the KUOW app or wherever you get your podcasts.